Hello everyone and welcome to the second episode in our CSS Grid mini-series. Now in this video we're going to be going over some basic positioning and layout for CSS grids, and we'll be covering specifically a new unit called fraction units. And mind the birds in the back, sorry, I cannot get them out this morning, so they're going to be a bit loud. So yeah, we'll be covering fraction units, repeat, grid column, and grid row. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the code. We'll open up our index.html and style.css here, and we'll start up our go live, or we'll start up our live server by clicking go live. And we'll be left with what we had in the previous video. Now, like I said previously, this is a little bit limited. You can have 100 pixel kind of columns, and then maybe an auto grid, or like an auto column, but like this is kind of limited. You can't like really customize this too much. So that's where fraction units come into play. And so instead of doing 100 auto, I can actually say one fraction unit, or fraction unit, which stands for FR. So instead of PX, which stands for pixels, we can use FR for fraction unit. And then we can say like 1FR, and then I can say 4FR. And if I save this, notice it changes the positioning or the sizing a little bit, but what happens now is if we resize, they'll actually grow, and then they'll shrink. So a fraction unit is basically saying divide this, this will be one of 6, because there's 6 fraction units total, so this will be 1/6 of the screen, this will be 1/6 of the screen, and this will be 2/3 of the screen basically. And so yeah, that's how fraction units are working. So another thing that we can actually do is if we wanted to make a uniform grid, for example, we could just say one fraction unit, one fraction unit, one fraction unit, and that would make a uniform size grid. But we can also just do a new thing called repeat one fraction unit 3, or 3 one fraction unit. There you go, my bad. So yeah, this is just repeating one fraction unit 3 times, and it's a shorthand basically to type out 1FR, 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 And the reason why we have this to repeat is because some common grid layouts are sometimes people actually use more. Like a common number is 12. People use 12 fraction units like this. And in order to position things, they would say, hey, I want to position things through 4 through 6. And then so it would take up these 3 grid units. So like this is basically, again, creating a grid to place things on. But for now, we're just going to use it like this. We're going to have 3 columns and 3 rows. So another thing we can actually do is, yeah, I'm going to actually increase this to 6 maybe. So yeah, now once you see we have 6, there's 6 columns, and then, there's 3 rows, but only 2 of them are being taken up. We can actually do something, which I'm going to quickly edit our README, fraction unit and repeat. We can do something called grid column and grid row. Now we're going to start with grid column. We're going to say ID is, let's give this like a header. Let's call this our header. So we'll say ID equals header. And then here in our CSS, we're going to select it, hash header. And we're going to say grid column, and then dash start will be 1. And then grid column dash end will be 5. And before I end any of this, notice when I was saying the reason why some people use grid like repeat 12 FR is because they can position things across multiple grid spots. So if I position our header, actually I'm going to change this 2 through 5. If I save this, notice now our header goes from item 2 through item 5, and it takes up all of the spots. So for example, again, if I change this back to 1 and I change this to 7, it will take up the entire first column, or the entire first row, my bad. And that's how we get that kind of positioning here. Now, let's just say, we'll just say class equals 2. We'll just create a couple classes. Class equals 3, and then no class here, and then class equals, although no, actually that's not going to work, my bad. So yeah, we have our header and then our grid item 2, and let's just say grid item 2 we want to take up, so we're going to create an ID of 2. We want it to take up 2 squares. So again, we're just going to come here at 2, and then we're going to say, or hash 2, and then we're going to say grid column. And another way to write this, instead of writing 1 to 7, grid column start 1 and 7, or start 1 and 2 in our case, we can write 1/2, and that, or 1/3, my bad, and that will do that. Because, for example, if I did grid column end of 3 and grid column dash start of 1, it would do the same thing. So this is just a quick shorthand. It's just a 1 and then slash, so a start/end basically. And then another thing we can do, for example, is we can move, if we wanted to move like grid item 7 between these 2 rows here, we could actually change 2 to be 2 through 4. That way we move it up here, and there's now an open space here. And grid item 6, we can take a look. We can say ID equals 6, and then we can select it in our CSS. And instead of using grid column, we can now use grid row. And then we can say we want it to be grid rows, I think it's 2 through 4, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, because this is, again, this is grid row 1, and then this is grid row 2, and this is grid row 3. And whenever you use that second number, the end number, it's basically end at this number minus 1. So if we have 0, 1, 2, or if we have 1, 2, 3, then we have to set 4 if we want it to go all the way to the bottom. And since we have 6 columns here, we have to set it to 7 in order to get it to stop at the end. And again, another way we could do this is the shorthand, 1#7, or grid column 1#7. Remember, we either use grid column or we can use grid column start and end. And another quick shorthand to learn is we can actually use 1, -1. And this is the same thing because when you use -1, when you use any negative number, it wraps around. This -1 actually becomes 7. This -2 actually becomes 6, -3 becomes 5. So basically you can think of it as 3, or you know, again, you have to add 1, so -2, and then say that many spaces off the end. So again, if I do -1, it means 0 spaces off the end, aka all the way to the end. So that was just a quick little cool you know, shorthand and way to position our grid items. For example, like grid item 9, let's just do another quick example using that. Let's just select it, 9. We can just say grid column is from, so it's at 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can say 4 to -1, 4 over -1, and that will expand it to the end. Or we could, again, we can literally just say 4, 7, and that'll also expand it to the end. They are interchangeable in our example. And remember, if I made this 7 grid units, notice that when I made this the grid 7 units wide, since I used the 1, -1 here, it actually expanded along with me. So I'm going to change it back really quick. And then I'm going to, instead of using 4, -1, I'm going to use 4, 7, which is the same thing because we have a 6 wide. But if I make it 7, notice now our grid item 9 does not expand far enough. So we would actually have to change it to 4, 8. But if we just had it 4, -1, it would always expand to the end. So that's just a cool little trick to know. So yeah, this has been basic positioning with our grid. Notice that this is really, really powerful because, you know, for example, in the future we could have, like, let me show you. Let me copy this a bunch of times, just a bunch of grid item 8s. And I save this. And then let's just create another 50 pixel. Let's make this 12. So again, like we have this 12 grid layout, which because of all of our positioning is a little bit messed up right now. So I'll just comment that out, except I'll keep the coloring. Oops. So I'll comment out all the positioning. And notice when we have something like this, we can actually say, again, I want to position something on grid 5 through grid 7. So now we can put a button here that takes up these 3 spaces, and then we can put something else here that takes up these 3 spaces. And it allows us to build better layouts, because before we could only say, hey, I want this, and then I want this on top, and then maybe I want to center this or send this to the sides, but we can actually finely position, because let's say we wanted to do 14 rows. Now we have an even finer control over, how wide something is. And eventually, it's impractical to go too big, but, bigger columns means finer positioning. I can say I want it exactly here. And with a grid, we can actually put it exactly there on your website. So that's just a cool thing to keep in mind. So if you want to see more videos like this, specifically on CSS Grid, you can check out the playlist, which is linked in the description, currently uploading daily. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.